As a trauma survivor, I have always been interested in resilience. But growing up, I believed it was something that you were born with. Then in graduate school, I learned that it was a quality that we all possess and a set of skills we can all strengthen. Most of my resilience has come from writing and seeing myself in new ways by confronting the stories I've always told myself. The more I did that, the stronger I became, and I've dedicated my life to helping others do this work. This podcast is for anyone who wants to understand their story and how to revise it, because when we do that work, we change the world. Well, hello everyone. Welcome to my gratitude episode of the podcast. This is airing on what some people call the Thanksgiving holiday. So it's American Thanksgiving. But I do want to honor the fact that for many indigenous tribes, this is a national day of mourning. So this is a holiday which has two different ways to look at it, which feels really fitting because we just had an election in the United States. People have a lot of complicated feelings about it. And this is not a political episode, nor is this a political podcast. But I do want to honor the fact that for some people, their hearts are really full, and for others, they are empty. And that either way, there is a lot of turmoil and uncertainty in our world and in our country. And I feel that too. And part of my job is to connect with how I feel that in my own life and find ways to make meaning and ground in the midst of that so that I can feel those feelings and allow them to flow through me. Because professionally, I hold space for so many people. I hold space for the courageous writers who are my clients and my students who are working on tough stories, and for all of the people who are my guests on this podcast, and for all of the people in my life who experience challenges, whether they are deeply personal or they are expanded out into things happening out in the world. So that is what I do. And so I practice so many different practices, including gratitude, to help me stay grounded so that I can hold space for everyone else. So I want to talk about this practice for a moment, and then I'm going to end with some major gratitudes I have for all of you in relation to this podcast. So first, what is gratitude? Gratitude is the process of looking for the good, what we might call the bright spots in the midst of dark times. And it is an important practice to cultivate both for your mental health. So, gratitude, when you're expressing it and you are seeing that good, releases dopamine and serotonin in the brain, which improves your immune system's functioning, which tells your nervous system that you are safe and you are okay, which allows you to function. And it allows you to react from a strong foundation. So it connects you with your power by allowing your nervous system to work in its optimal way. But we want to make sure when we are practicing gratitude that we're not spiritually or psychologically bypassing ourselves. Like, here's one of my big pet peeves. I absolutely hate this about some of the ways that positive psychology works for some people. And that is the idea that, all we need to do is turn a frown upside down and oops, there's a smile. So if you just focus on the positive and you ignore all of the negative, everything is going to be okay. Well, sometimes that's not how you feel. And I think the American Thanksgiving holiday is a great time to talk about that, because even before we got into this very messy season, this was a very loaded holiday. Whether you see it as a day of mourning or a day of gratitude, you're getting together with people that you may or may not like or get along with. Or this could be a group of people where there's a lot of reenactments of old trauma. Or maybe you're alone, and the thing that you're facing is the fact that there is this huge expectation that you're supposed to be connected to everyone else, and that is not your experience. And I have been in all of those experiences over the years. And oh my gosh, can it be really difficult? So, how do we hold space for whatever we are feeling right now and practice gratitude at the same time so that it's a both and? It's not a dismissal of the difficult, it is an acknowledgement of the difficult alongside what is also going well. And I think when I was really sick with Lyme disease and I thought I was going to die, that was the time when I learned how to do this. Every day I felt absolutely horrible. And what I learned was denying it didn't make it any less real. So I had to feel the disappointment, the sadness, the grief of what was happening to my body, the actual physical symptoms of feeling really rotten, and also look for one thing that I could hold on to as an anchor that was the good in my life so that I didn't slip into total despair. Right? So that's what gratitude does. It keeps us from slipping into total despair so that we can react when we need to, and we have a way to just put one foot forward and then the next. So we want to hold space for being able to do both things at the same time. And one thing that has helped me, this has served as an anchor for actually most of my life. I can't tell you who first shared this quote or first said this, but I can tell you where I encountered it. So I grew up in a Buddhist community, and I first encountered "It's always darkest before the dawn" in an English translation of a letter between this Buddhist monk and one of his disciples. This Buddhist monk was talking to someone who was going through this really dark time, and was written, "It's always darkest before the dawn." And oh my gosh, there were times in my life, especially when I was a child, and all kinds of chaos and violence and horrible things were happening to me. Just having that as an anchor, "It's always darkest before the dawn," was a reminder that light exists even if I can't see it. And when I was sick with Lyme disease and I couldn't always see it, I would try to imagine it being there even if I couldn't feel it. So this is what I mean by that. I would say things like, I am grateful that I can breathe, right? I can't always see my breath. It doesn't always feel like something that's out there tangible I can hold on to. But if I'm able to think about gratitude and I'm able to breathe, then I am okay in some way. So I would hold on to these little anchor moments, these tiny bright spots, and that helped me make it through difficult times. But this is also a writing podcast, so you might be thinking, okay, well, why are you sharing this with me? This has nothing to do with writing. Guess what, my friends? It has everything to do with writing, because practicing gratitude in the midst of dark times without dismissing the darkness will train your brain to be able to find bright spots, those little glimmers and shimmers of light. And that's important because if you're writing a tough story, our brains can get really stuck on all of the difficult things that are happening. And then what we do is we create this train wreck of pain on the page, and we have this manuscript where there's no breathing room or rest for the reader. It's just difficult moment after difficult moment after difficult moment, because that's what our brain is trained to focus on, right? Because that's the energy we're bringing to things. And then you send that to your writing group and they're like, we need a little bit more levity in this. And then you want to shake them sometimes because you're like, but it felt really difficult. And maybe your frustration comes from the fact that you can't find those bright spots. Practicing gratitude in the everyday life can help you begin to find those bright spots because you're training your brain to see the both and. And that can improve your writing because it will help with the pacing of your projects. So this isn't one thing or the other, right? These things are related to writing and they're also related to your life. So I want to wrap up by expressing my deep and heartfelt gratitude to all of you who have walked this podcast journey with me so far. So we are, 48 episodes into the podcast. By the time this ends at the end of 2024, and yes, there will be a 2025 set of seasons, but by the end of this year, I will have made it to over 50 episodes. And this podcast would not exist without you. So you are an integral part of this podcast. And I want to thank you for not just listening, right? Your attention is very valuable to me, but also for letting me know what you like, what you want more of, and the space this podcast plays in your own life. So I'm going to do a few shout outs. I will continue to do this intermittently as the podcast continues, but here are some big gratitude shout outs that I have for people right now. So Ellen, you told me that you never miss an episode. Thank you very much for sharing that with me. Megan, you shared that when you can't sleep, and oh my gosh, I know what that's like, being a woman of a certain age, that if you got a lot on your mind and it's Thursday, you'll go to see if the podcast episode has dropped and you'll listen to it. And I am so grateful to be a part of your day and to play that role of helping ease your mind. That means so much to me. Thank you so much. Christine Fayor shared this with me. She said, "Hello, I just watched your interview with Tia Levings. It was great. And I got a few writing tips along the way. I raised my children in the same ATI cult as Tia, and I wrote about my experience in a book called Behind the Dress. I've come out on the other side and am healing from all the brainwashing as well as having a newly wonderful relationship with my children. I'm happy to subscribe to your podcast, a plus in my writing world. Thank you." So listening to Tia's episode helped her connect with all of the ways that she has healed, and she's a writer and she's learning more about writing. Matt Bailey had this to say: "Just wanted to drop a note to say how much I love your podcast and hearing your take on these topics. Even though I'm not a writer, the way you talk about it alongside the psychology and mental health components is truly special." Thank you, Matt, for that. And here are some episode-specific things that people have said. This is from YouTube. So this was a comment on YouTube for the episode I did with Ingrid Clayton on not gaslighting your writing process. She said, "Beautiful interview. Thank you both." Sugar98 had this to say about the episode that I recorded with Debbie Weiss on dating disasters and finding yourself after loss. This was helpful to me as a recent retiree. There is grief in that, an identity shift, reconciliation with the former self, and the experiences, which is why I am a new and old writer. The advice to new writers really helped. Thank you both. Debbie had something so great to say, and I am so glad that it was helpful. Sarah Liebob had this to say about the episode that I recorded on sibling loss with Lynn Shattuck and Allison Shelton. "What a beautiful, meaningful conversation about sibling loss. I am so very grateful to all of you." I'm Bookwild had this to say about the episode with Laura Lillybridge, where we talked about dementia and dealing with having to be no contact with parents. I love this perspective coming from a freedom of choice. And Mary Austin texted this to the podcast, which is something you can do on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts. She said, "Lisa, the podcasts lately have been extra fantastic. Sarah Perry, Tia Levings, and Dr. Romani on narcissism have all been full of meaning and wisdom. Thank you." So thank you to all of you for sharing your thoughts with me. I'd love you to keep sending them along through YouTube comments, through messages on Apple Podcasts where you can leave a review, or Spotify where you can also leave a review or leave a message. You can also send a text. So please keep doing that so that I can hear more of what you like. And also, if you've got some ideas for me for the podcast, please let me know. I am always open to your suggestions, and I love to know that my content is speaking to something that you have an interest in, which for one thing that I'm going to be working on is Krista Hillhouse, who I know is a regular listener, said she wants to hear more on intergenerational trauma and how do you write about that. So please know an episode on that is coming in 2025. So I'm going to wrap up now just by, again, offering my deep, heartfelt gratitude to all of you. Thank you so much for being listeners. And if today is a day where you're experiencing some heartache, life is difficult, you're not sure where to go, I want to say that I see you. I have been in that place, and I am today holding space for you to have peace and ease, and to know what is the next right step for you. Be well, my friends. Until next week, I'll see you soon. If you're learning from or enjoying this podcast, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. It's a free and easy way to support the podcast. You can also get the latest episodes delivered to your inbox by signing up for my Writing Your Resilience newsletter. As a thank you, you'll receive a free copy of A Trauma Survivor's Guide to Writing the Tough Stuff. You can also follow the podcast on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, where you can leave a 5-star review. If you have questions for me, comments about the podcast, or questions or topics you'd like me to consider for the Writing Your Resilience podcast, please leave a comment on YouTube. I read them all, and I'd love to hear from you.